There we go. Good to see you. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on. A lot of terrible stuff in the United States. Fear and trembling. Uh, but we're going to try to keep our minds uh, on the straight and narrow, the Dharma path today. So we're going to begin with a motivation through prayers. Recitations, we can call them. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma. But that in this case, that means also uh, contemplating what you've listened to, what you've heard, and meditating on it. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu baju dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu baju dagni kyapsu chi Tagi chunyen gipe sognam ki trola penchir sangi drupasho. Then, as is customary, offering a mandala to request the teachings and request the primordial gurus to inspire the expositor, in this case, miserable me, to be empowered to rain down the profound and extensive Dharma. Sashipuki Chukshing Meto Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Uwargi Drokunam Dakshing La Chupasho. O holy, perfect, pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdoms, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued or those to be trained. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Dulce Samba. Yeah. So good to see you. Hi, Jeremy. Good to see you from the Southern Hemisphere. So, yeah, we're going to do a little meditation to try to set our minds, relax our minds a little and get rid of the continuity of conceptual thoughts that we've been staring at for some time. So sit comfortably. Relax your body. Relax your mind. Remind yourself there's nothing else you have to attend to now. You can put all of those other worries in the back burner. You can come back to them later. You can worry about them later. And as the Buddha did in many of his sutras, place your mindfulness on the breathing in front, having first noticed the breathing, recognized it, and then holding it in with the mental factor mindfulness, assisted by the mental factor introspection, which is like a mental spy watching whether your mind diverts itself into other objects and other trains of thought. general instructions while you're watching the breathing. Main thing is that you recognize when you're breathing in as opposed to breathing out, and whether it's a short, medium, or deep inhalation or exhalation. Other than that, just watching the respiration. When you notice your mind going off on a tangent, bring it back to the mindfulness of the breathing. Let that tangent sort of dissolve back into the consciousness. If you've been successful, bring your attention to the more subtle object of your mental consciousness. Withdrawing your senses, so to speak, from the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body organs, hunkering down into the heart chakra. And remind yourself that all the things you are thinking about or that are appearing to you or you're imagining, listening to, or inner conversations, plans, memories, all are appearing within the mental consciousness. The senses don't think, don't have conceptions. And the fact that these mental events in the mental consciousness can arise and retreat, absorb back into the consciousness without any obstruction is what is referred to as the conventional Buddha nature, developmental Buddha nature. And observing that, while actually having a mental image of that lack of obstruction, like a vacuous vacuity, emptiness, that's difficult to even get a mental image of, rather, as opposed to even realizing it. Simply to feel joy that we can develop. We know that we can develop good qualities. There's no hindrance in our mind. From the nature of the mind, the conventional nature of the mind, that prevents us from developing qualities that we don't have now. And there's no obstruction or hindrance preventing us from removing, suppressing, and even abandoning completely our faulty states of mind, our selfishness, our pride, our big egos, our lack of concern for others. All of these can be eliminated through familiarity. And the fact that we are here now thinking of this, even though, insects and animals and hell beings and other realms all have this Buddha nature, they don't have the luxury of actually observing it and thinking about its benefits because they don't have a life of leisure and endowment. They don't have this, at this moment, they don't have this auspicious moment that the Buddha so highly praised as to not waste, because we can use it to achieve the two great goals of liberation or enlightenment, or even subsidiary goal of developing the realizations that lead to liberation and enlightenment, like renunciation, bodhicitta, the right view of emptiness. This is what we can be using our life of leisure and endowment that is so rare, like the chance of a blind turtle putting its head through a golden ring floating on the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. When he just sticks his head up in one place, that ring can be somewhere else, that ring representing the Buddha Dharma appearing in a world system. It's so rare, first of all, even for the blind turtle to come to the surface, which means it's rare to have a human life. It's even infinitesimally rare to meet the Dharma, and even more than that, to meet the teachings of Lama Khapa. Between the goal of liberation from samsara, finding our own nirvana, and the achievement of full enlightenment of a Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha himself praised for those of high intelligence. He advised those of high intelligence not to be satisfied with his lesser vehicle. But they should study it, they should read it, contemplate it, meditate on it, but not actualize the final goal of nirvana, but rather strive immediately for enlightenment out of compassion for all mother sentient beings who have been depthlessly kind, numberless lives in the past, and even when they appear now as enemies, they're kind in giving us the opportunity in the human realm to experience the ripening of negative karma, our negative karma, say, for instance, our minds being saddened by events or actually impacted on our paychecks, like the tariff surcharge are causing some of us. We can think those karmas that I'd accumulated in the past, the negative karma that ripens this way now, would have ripened in the future somewhere in the lower realms for a much longer period of time and much greater suffering. So even our enemies are kind. If we could achieve a state of in which we could benefit these sentient beings, to repay their kindness, their depthless kindness, that would be fantastic. As a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, an advocate, whatever. But that would only be helping them this lifetime, and is noble, of course, but it's more important to look to the long picture, to be able to help them in future lives also by teaching them the Holy Dharma, teaching them how to refrain from negative karma, how to collect virtuous karma, how to benefit other sentient beings. In order to know even how to be skillful in teaching, we need to know others' minds. We need to know all the methods to lead them out of their present state gradually over however many lifetimes it might take in this state of enlightenment. To do that, we ourselves have to become enlightened. That's my main goal in life, to become enlightened for the sake of sentient beings. And of course, all the subsidiary causes that are necessary for that, as we recognize them. We need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom to achieve enlightenment, to be able to manifest the form bodies through the collection of merit, and to manifest the mental body of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, the wisdom body of the Buddha, and its emptiness, the Svavavikakaya, through the collection of wisdom, which we don't have that much understanding of. So we need to rely on the teachings of the Buddha, especially as explained by Nagarjuna in his fundamental wisdom, expounded upon, explained by Chandrakirti in his Madhyamaka Avatara, entry into the middle way or supplement to the middle way. And as he was in the, 6th or 7th century, Lama Tsong himself, much later, explained the intent of Chandrakirti in his Gompa Rabsel, the illumination of the intent, which we're studying. So think, I'm going to listen, contemplate, meditate on the material for the aim of achieving the two collections of merit and wisdom, become skillful in knowing how to collect virtuous karma, for instance, and how to meditate on emptiness for the sake of achieving enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings who are suffering much worse than ourselves. We can, even in our worst moments of physical pain or mental pain, it pales in comparison to multitudes of humans in this world system who have much greater suffering, let alone beings in the animal, hungry ghosts, and hell realms. I think I'm going to participate in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Yeah. Yeah, relax. Bring your mind back to the present. Hi, Zavansh, you've joined us. Mikhail sent his apologies. He can't attend. He'll listen to the teaching and come back to us. Venerable Shanka is not here. I want to tease him when he gets back. I hope if he listens to the recording, he'll hear my admonition. Yeah. And Diana is attending a rally or a demonstration or a protest in New York City. I think there will be another which Richard will attend tomorrow, I think, or he's thinking about attending. Yeah. So how are we doing? What do you think? Yeah, Rachel, what's happening? Oh, thumbs up. Okay. Good.
Just rolling back into the public schools. Lots of fun.
Yeah, you're teaching again. Okay, excellent. Has anyone listened to or attended the first lecture by Jay Garfield on the Shantideva site? Yeah. How did you find Richard?
I thought it was phenomenal, as it always is with him. He's really quite remarkable, and I've ordered his book. I haven't gotten it yet, but he's a very very enthusiastic lecturer, and he puts a lot of the Buddhist philosophy within the context of Western philosophy, and there's a lot of parallels that he keeps on drawing, which are very, very interesting.
Right. So have you studied Western philosophy?
Not really. I took one class at Columbia with a legendary professor, but I read it on occasion. I've read around in it, but I can't say that I formally studied it now.
Right.
But I've read enough to know. I've read enough to be dangerous, basically.
Oh,
I've tried to read Wittgenstein and tried to read Kant and a bunch of others, and I can sort of recognize the parallels there, and it's really quite interesting.
right. So Suvash, did you say you'd also watched it?
Yes, Venerable George. I was there in his class,
Oh,
and
you
I also have read most of the book.
oh,
I actually found the subject matter to be very relevant. I have, this is my second time around through the Madhyamika Avatara. The first time around, I had the same takeaway that he defines in his book, which is that it's the world is a dismal swamp. Okay.
swamp, right?
Yes, that's one reading of Chandrakirti. Okay. But he, through his book, he goes to show that no, you have to pay attention and read, a lot of his writing to come to a much more positive conclusion on Chandrakirti. And I found that that's actually what has happened by studying with you and by reading the Gompa Rapsel, is that this time around, I've had a much more positive take on Chandrakirti.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So I could recommend that. It was a very good presentation. He had some technical glitches. He wasn't able to get up his PowerPoint on the screen, which I was surprised Snehi was attending. I thought she would be able to smooth that over, but he wanted to put the quotations up there. So that's you'll see it fits very well with what we've been talking about. So I recommend, if you have a chance to listen to that. It's up on YouTube on the Shantideva website there.
The most amazing thing is he's doing this from Tasmania.
Yes, yes. He has a relatively good internet connection there. So, yeah. So, Jeremy, are you close to Tasmania, or was Tasmania's off the coast of what? Of Australia or of New Zealand?
Yeah, Tasmania is an island at the south of Australia. But there's quite a large sea in between, maybe a few hundred kilometers across the sea.
Right. So he's there. So yeah, there was one thing I wanted to mention. If you do listen to it, he when he's talking about Chandrakirti's Prasanapada, he mentions that it's a commentary to the fundamental wisdom, which we've mentioned many times. But when he mentions the Madhyamaka Vatara, which he mentions a lot, it seemed to say that it was an independent composition by Chandrakirti, but it is actually a commentary. It's the meaning commentary, considered to be a meaning commentary to fundamental wisdom. So Chandrakirti wrote two commentaries to fundamental wisdom. One is the word commentary, the Prasanapada. The other is the meaning commentary, which is the Madhyamaka Vatara. So, okay. Having said that, how are we doing? Any questions about what we have been talking about?
I have a question about what you just said.
Yes, go on.
What's the difference between a meaning commentary and a word commentary?
Yeah, so a meaning commentary, well, say, worst of it, a word commentary means you sort of quote the text and you say what each of the words means or what each of the phrases mean through the whole text. You go through the whole text. Essentially, you're reading the whole fundamental wisdom and commenting on it. Whereas a meaning commentary takes the fundamental wisdom as the subject you want to introduce, and you give the general meaning of it, quoting it in many places, but not going through every single stanza and chapter of the fundamental wisdom. So that is what Chandrakirti aimed to do in the Madhyamaka Vatara. And that's why the avatara part of the name, Madhyamaka Vatara, sometimes is translated as supplement or introduction to. Avatar is something, in Tibetan we say jukva. Jukva usually means to enter into. So entry into the middle way, that means into Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, or supplement to it. That's how some Tibetan teachers have said that that's kind of the meaning of it, that Chandrakirti was supplementing the fundamental wisdom karikas with other material on the method side, especially from other works of Nagarjuna and other teachers. Okay, so that's the difference between a meaning commentary and a word commentary, as I understand it.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah. Okay, so today, officially, we are on page 339 in Thupten Jinpa's text, Thupten Jinpa's translation of Gompa Rapsel, and page 191 of the FPMT translation that was done by Venerable Joan Nysel. And these sections that are quite difficult, you'll notice in Venerable Joan's translation, many times in her footnote, she says, amended. Her original translation was like, the material is so difficult that she was unsure, so she just amended according to Thupten Jinpa's translation. So she did have a chance to see Thupten Jinpa's translation. Okay, so just before that, is that the right place? Oh no, am I in the right place? Yeah.
You're looking for the sentence that starts, when Chittamatra establishes the dependent nature.
Right. But right before that, oh yeah, right. So right before that, you see indented a quotation from the commentary to the differentiation of the two truths, which is the auto commentary by Gyanagarbha. Gyanagarbha wrote this text, The Two Truths. Cognition emerges as awareness that is itself empty of duality and cognizes that absence of duality. It cannot cognize the absence of duality, however, if it is not itself empty of duality. So I'm trying to see okay, that's coming. Yeah, okay. So, Richard, did you have a chance to catch up? Okay. So,
Yes, I did, but that doesn't mean that I understood, especially these last few paragraphs. I found them very opaque. Sorry.
yes. So, just to assuage your feelings, Geshe Zopa said this section is a little bit difficult. So when he says that usually means, yeah. So we have to have our thinking caps on today. So let's continue from there. As Doris reminded us, when Chittamatra establishes, this is reading Thupten Jinpa's translation just after that quotation, when Chittamatra establishes the dependent nature to be devoid of the imputed nature. So what that means is that they're trying to establish their meaning of emptiness, that what is imputed upon dependent phenomena is some sense of duality between the subjective mind and the object that it perceives, right? Like say the I consciousness seems to be distant from and separate from its objects, whereas according to Chittamatra, they arise from the same seed. So they're empty of that imputed nature. That imputed nature in this case is a sense of duality. So when Chittamatra establishes the dependent nature, which includes all of the things of the world and the mind itself and the mental consciousness, all of them to be devoid of the imputed nature, if cognition, the dependent nature, is first affirmed by a reflexive awareness. How did Venerable Jones say this? If consciousness, other power phenomena, is first established by a self-cognizer, that's more according with, when it is proved or established by a self-cognizer, a reflexive awareness, free of dualistic perceptions, then such a basis could be realized in terms of the absence of subject-object duality. Okay, so much, so far, okay? Makes sense? What do you think, Paul? Is that pretty clear, right? Yeah. And to think about it, that's more or less what we've been talking about. So the enterprise Chittamatra is they want to try to prove, their emptiness, and to be able to realize that emptiness with a mental consciousness, you have to be able to show that the subjective mind actually was realizing emptiness, their emptiness, which means this lack of duality. And in order to realize the subjective mind, they claim that you need to have this reflexive awareness, this rangrik. Okay. So the paragraph continues. If, on the other hand, such a basis is not first established by reflexive awareness, then one cannot take it as the basis and establish it as empty of the imputed nature. If it's not first established by reflexive awareness, that means proved by, because when we talk about some phenomena as existing, we have to be able to, one of the synonyms of existence, let's say phenomena that exist between existence and non-existence, is that it is realized by a valid cognizer or established by a valid cognizer. So, and one kind of valid cognizer is direct perception, such as reflexive awareness or self-knowing. So if it's not established by self-knowing, your whole enterprise is not going to work. So that continues, this is what Chittamatra says. It doesn't say that in the text. That's just, he's making clear this is the Chittamatra assertion. Hence, Gyanagarbha presents the argument that according to you, Chittamatra, so Gyanagarbha was who? Was he a Chittamatra? Chittamatran, Luis? You don't know? Oh, who knows? Paul, who is Gyanagarbha? What school did he support?
I believe he was, well, he was definitely, was he Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamaka, I want to say? Or was he actually just Chittamatra? I can't remember.
Yeah. So we'll investigate that more. So he was Svatantrika Madhyamaka, whether Sautrantika or Yogacara. So Bhava Viveka was definitely Sautrantika Svatantrika, right?
Right.
And Gyanagarbha may be the Yogacara.
I think so, because I think he and Kamalashila and Shantarakshita are usually grouped together.
Right. Okay. So this is why, so hence Gyanagarbha presents the argument that according to you, Chittamatra, the dependent nature must be established by its evidence. What is that? By its evidence. I'm not sure what this is. It sounds a little bit like some of Jay's terminology, Jay Garfield's terminology, which is trying to use Western philosophical terms for Tibetan terms. This is why, hence, Gyanagarbha presents the argument that according to you, Chittamatra, the dependent nature must be established by its evidence. I think that means by its pramana, which is the non-dual reflexive awareness that is verifying it, let's say. However, this reflexive awareness remains unestablished. So this is going back to that quotation that we just had that Richard said he was still dealing with, that one that's indented just before this paragraph we've been reading. Cognition emerges as an awareness that is itself empty of duality and cognizes that absence. It cannot, however, if it is not empty of duality. So that's what Lama Tsongkhapa is commenting on here. So then it continues. Some some people claim that in refuting this kind of reflexive awareness, Jnanagarbha, so Jnanagarbha is refuting self-knowing. So if he is a Yogacara Svatantrika, that means that not all Yogacara Svatantrikas accept self-awareness or apperception or reflexive awareness. Some claim that in refuting this kind of reflexive awareness, Jnanagarbha is dismissing yogic reflexive gnosis, which is usually what we say, soso rikpe yeshe. Okay, some of you won't know what that means. Paul will know what that means. I don't know. Anyone else know some of the Tibetan? Does that term something you've run across, Suvash? Soso rikpe yeshe. So the rikpa is the word that we've been translating as not soso rikpe, soso rangrikpe yeshe, rangrik. So rangrik is what we've been translating as reflexive awareness or self-knowing. But this term soso rangrik, especially when it's in the phrase soso rangrikpe yeshe, is actually referring to the Rangrik doesn't mean self-knower. It means the individual himself or herself experience, which can't be experienced by others. For instance, in the Heart Sutra, when we talk about it being inexpressible and so forth, the perfection of wisdom, it's not transferable to others. Your own personal realization of it is not something that can be just immediately shared with others. So Jnanagarbha is dismissing yoga. Some claim that he's dismissing yogic reflexive awareness, wherein suchness is perceived within each unique individual experience, and that Jnanagarbha is also rejecting reflexivity in the conventional sense indicated when a person utters statements such as, "I am aware of myself." These are simply foolish talk. I would like to say this is simply foolish talk, but anyway, I don't know grammar that well. So in this regard, I wonder, Doris, could you please put up in the chat, maybe you've already done it, the précis, first of all. So one of the current good scholars on Buddhism, Jay Garfield yesterday, or when I watched it yesterday, I don't know when he gave his talk, he mentioned several other current scholars he holds in high esteem. So Jim Apple is one scholar that I hold in high esteem. I think I've mentioned him in class sometime before, but Doris told me she didn't think I'd mentioned him in our class here. Jim Apple was at Deer Park for all of Gompa Rapsel when Geshe Sopa taught. And in the summers at lunch, so Geshe would teach in the morning, then we'd have lunch, and Jim Apple and I and another friend, Jim Blumenthal, would sit together and we would discuss these things. James Apple is a professor at Calgary, University of Calgary, in Canada. And his wife, I think the reason that they decided to go there is his wife also got a position on the faculty. Anyway, so this is a précis. You know what a précis is? Am I pronouncing it? Is that good pronunciation, Richard? We don't have.
So yeah, the précis is how I've pronounced it.
Précis. Okay.
Yeah, précis.
Kind of like an abstract. So this is all I had for several years. I've been looking for the actual article that this is the précis of, the abstract of. Finally was able to find it. But one thing to notice here is that in the Heart Sutra, right? There is tradition in Tibetan Buddhism to always precede the recitation of the Heart Sutra by this four-line praise. I think we mentioned it before. Do you remember me talking about this in our class? Maybe my short-term memory is gone, and I'm remembering when I taught it at Land of Medicine Buddha. Do you remember we talking about this verse? You,
You
Louise?
mentioned it 3 times over the last 3.5 years.
So this is a verse and when I taught it at Land of Medicine Buddha, the Heart Sutra is a long course that you can listen to. We would always begin the class, I think, with recitation of this verse. So this is a very famous verse, and the third line of it you can see on that précis in Tibetan. If you like the Tibetan, you can see Soso Rangrik Yeshe Chulyuwa, or in the phonetics of it below that, or what do you call it? Not the phonetics, the transliteration, the third line, Soso Rangrik Yeshe Chulyuwa. So usually when we recited it at Sarah J, I seem to remember it was the third syllable, the last syllable was Chulyul Chen, but maybe that was because that was trying to rhyme with the first line that ends with chin. We say, Masam Jome, Shera Paro Chin, Make Magak, Namke Ngoni, Soso Rangrik Yeshe Chuyu Chen. That's how I remember it. Dusum Gelwe Yumla Chakselo. So the point here is that third line where it's talking about Soso Rangrik Yeshe, that's what is Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about here when he is, let me get this back here, when he's referring to Gyanagarbhas, that some people misinterpret Gyanagarbha, that he dismisses yogic reflexive gnosis. That's Soso Rangrik Yeshe. So he doesn't dismiss that. That's something that the Rangrik in that phrase doesn't mean the same Rangrik as reflexive awareness. That's the point. Also, one thing that Jim, in his actual article, that this is a précis, so you have this. Doris, could you put the actual full article? I was able, after one sleepless night, I think I got to bed at 9 o'clock in the morning, finally finding the actual article that was the précis of. So you have that, you can see in the chat, again by James B. Apple. And in that, he mentions that there is this tradition of reciting this praise that is sometimes attributed to Rahula. So, yeah. Rachel, do you know who Rahula was?
Yeah, the son of the Buddha. Well, I mean, the name in general I know, but also it was attributed to the son of Shakyamuni, correct?
Right. So Rahula was when Buddha left home. I don't think Rahula had been born yet, right? I think he was born after the Buddha left. His wife was pregnant, and Rahula was born. And there are all the stories about, how Buddha coerced him into coming, not coerced him, tricked him into coming to the monastery and becoming a monk and everything. And supposedly, one tradition is that Rahula wrote this praise, this four-line praise, as a teaching for his mother. I'm not sure if that means, because his mother had died after his birth, and maybe he wrote this for her in the heaven of 33, where the Buddha went to teach her. I don't know exactly what that tradition says, but then there's no kind of scriptural source of where this verse is attributed to Rahula. You can't find it in his praise to the perfection of wisdom. So it's unclear where this came from, such as several other verses, like that one verse that was on the pillar in the Dalai Lama's temple that we talked about. I think you, Louise, you had mentioned that verse. I can't remember what the verse was, and we said there was no kind of a source of it anywhere in the scriptures. There are several other famous verses, and one that we'll talk about today about each consciousness has one continuum that have no, we can't find the sources. They just, in fact, no one ever quotes it. In fact, Thupten Jinpa mentions at that point that he's never been able to find a source of that other quotation. So here in this verse, Jim has gone back to where did the Tibetans get when did they first start reciting this? And it seems that the tradition began at Vikramashila. Does anyone know what Vikramashila was? Yeah, and Subhashnos.
Yes, it was a competing institution, just like Nalanda.
Yeah, competing, I'm not sure. I guess you could say.
Yeah, right. I shouldn't say competing.
Very
similar.
Yeah, so it was a Buddhist monastery, kind of like Nalanda, and Atisha was also there, and when he was there, he supposedly this verse was chanted by the monks there, this 4-line verse, but the first line of it, as you could see from the précis, the first line of it begins with the syllable ma, which is not just M-A, but is the syllable S-M-R-A. Actually it's pronounced ma, and it usually refers to speech or recognition or utterance or something like that. Like when we say Chetamawa in Tibetan, what does Mawa mean in Chetamawa, Paul? When we talk about the Vaibhashika system.
Right. So Mawa usually means to propound or to promote or assert, something like that. So Cheja, is the differentiation, I guess, or the individual.
Yeah. So usually nowadays, Jim Apple mentioned the only 3 sources, these original sources from Vikramashila, Atisha, and 2 other lamas, they are the only ones that begin with this syllable that talks about speech or utterance. All of the modern presentations of it in the monastic textbooks, and I'll say in the monastic, you have a book of prayers, your prayer book, kind of like your Bible, that you would bring to the monastery main hall when monks are chanting. So all the prayers are in that. They all have just the syllable ma. So it was masam would seem to be inconceivable if you take it just the negative particle ma. And jome would mean inexpressible. But when you recognize that the original verse had the first syllable that had to do with utterance, the syllable me, what is it? Ma sam jo me, the 4th syllable in, that means also is a negative particle. That seems to include 3 things. There is no ma, there's no sam, and there's no j or jo. There is no utterance, there is no conceivability, and there's no expressibility, or as Jim Apple translated that, homage to unutterable, inconceivable, inexpressible perfect wisdom, as Paro Chin, unborn, unceasing essence of space, the sphere of self-aware gnosis. So that means that it is that which is utilized, that which is recognized by this special yogic direct perception of the meditators in direct realization of emptiness, which is their own experience. I pay homage to the mother of the victorious ones of the three times, the Dusum Gyalwe Yumla Chaksalo. So when we talk about the mother of the victors, many times we've talked about the Prajnaparamita being called the mother. So the realization of emptiness is that which gives rise to the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas. So it is a common mother. They have different fathers. They have different motivations. The Hinayana father is renunciation. That's their main means or method side. And the Bodhisattvas have as their father, like Manjushri, the aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, bodhicitta. Okay, so I just wanted to pass those on to you. And those of you who don't get headaches from reading these long texts, you might like to read Jim Apple's actual article that the Précis was about, and to see that there is this, this evidence now that Jim has uncovered for the origin of this praise. It seemed to have originated at Vikramashila during the time of Atisha and so forth. Okay, making sense? We're all together? Doris, what do you think?
I don't know if this is a good place to remind you about Paul Williams' text.
Oh, yeah. So in our discussion group last Monday, we had a PDF that we distributed. And I think, is that from you, Doris? That's the PDF?
No, it's the link to Internet Archives where people can download the PDF.
Right. So this is a book by Paul Williams. And can you read the title, Doris? What was it called?
It's called the reflexive nature of awareness, a Tibetan Madhyamaka defense.
Right. So as opposed to Jay Garfield's defense of the Gelugpa in his first teaching at Shantideva Center the other day, Paul Williams some years ago took up the cause of the Sakya tradition, which Jay mentioned in his first class. That's sort of one of the alternative interpretations of Chandrakirti as opposed to Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation of Chandrakirti. Paul Williams takes that up, and we distributed that text, which you can find in the Internet Archive, so it's not under any copyright. So you can download that, and if you're a real Dharma geek, I don't have the emoji, so there's this geek emoji you can put up on your messages. If you're a real Dharma geek, you can read through that. And maybe that would be interesting also especially for those like Suvash and Richard who are listening to Jay Garfield's talk, or maybe some of the others who will continue. I think he's going to give, 6 talks or something like that? 5 talks. So one has happened, so there'll be 4 more. So this might be a good reference to see what he's referring to when he's referring to the Sakya tradition in their alternative interpretation. So thanks for reminding me, Doris, about that. Okay.
If I could also add, sorry.
Continue.
That's not going to be published on our website, Shantideva. Richard, you can put it in the Dropbox, but it's not going to be on the page.
Okay.
If that made sense.
No problem.
Okay. So we'll continue now with the next outline. So what with this outline that we've just been doing, that's been gone for some time, asking for the proof of dependent nature and showing how it is unsound, that is finished. So we've asked the Chittamatra what's their proof for their realization of emptiness, and they said that you had to have reflexive awareness to do that. So we've rejected that, and now the opponent, the Chittamatra, is going to respond that reflexive awareness is indeed okay. You got it wrong, Prasangika. So now we're going to reject the opponent's response. Okay. So you have an idea where we are. Does that make sense? We've already rejected it, and now Chittamatra is going to try to say, excuse me, you got it wrong. So this has two outlines in the Venerable Jones, stating the other's system, the system of the others. That means presenting what the Chittamatra system is, and then refuting that system. Okay, or as Jimpa says, presenting the opponent's position and refuting that position. Okay, so the first one, presenting the opponent's position. Okay, so like the Jimpa's translation here, subscribing to the Sautrantika view, like subscribing to the podcast of the Sautrantikas, some, that is Chittamatra. So what he's talking about here, the Sautrantikas generally accept those who are followers of reasoning, I guess, that follow Dharmakirti and Dignaga in their Pramana texts. They generally accept Rangrik. And the Chittamatrans subscribing to that Sautrantika view, okay, subscribing to the Sautrantika view, some, that is the Chittamatra, present the following to prove reflexive awareness. So Chittamatra wants to prove it, right? So now again, we've already refuted them earlier about reflexive awareness, but now they're going to bring this up. They're going to say, the instant a flame appears, I say a fire, either the flame of a candle or the flame of a fire, the tongue of the fire, it simultaneously illuminates both itself as well as objects such as a vase or such as a vase. Yeah, your dog is going to be very erudite in future life there, Richard. So, does it make sense? Does a flame illuminate itself? Louise, what do you think?
That was exactly the question I wanted to ask.
Yeah. What do you think, Louise?
Of course, it's according to illuminates itself and all the objects around it.
So if I have a candle here and it's flame, it illuminates,
At least itself.
It's dark, it illuminates the books and the table and things around. But does it illuminate itself? What do you think, Rachel?
I think it's a weird question. I think it's a weird concept. I don't think the question is weird. I think the notion that a flame can illuminate itself assumes a subject and object to something that it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So yeah,
I don't know how to describe it other than it just seems like an incoherent question.
Richard sounds enough like Rachel. I'd actually ask Rachel, but you thought I'd said Richard. Rachel, what do you think? Does a flame illuminate itself?
That happened in India all the time. That was my name, Richard. So, it is like, if it is illumination, if the flame is illumination itself, It's
Oh, the
it's
flame-
visible because it's illumination, not because it illuminates itself. It is illumination.
it illuminates, and generally, like when we talk about, remember when we talk about knowers, there are two kind of knowers, other knower and self-knowers, right? So the Chittamatra is trying to press this thing that in a flame not only illuminates others, but it illuminates itself. Whereas if the flame illuminated itself, you would have to say that the flame was actually dark before, and at some point, and it illuminates that darkness. So that generally we wouldn't agree with that generally. But anyway, let's continue. So the instant a flame appears, it simultaneously, this is Chittamatra's argument, simultaneously illuminates both itself as well as objects such as a vase. So we know that it illuminates other things, but they're also using the important word here, simultaneously, because they're saying that it's not a self-knowing of the consciousness that comes later. It's going to come at the very time, or self-awareness is going to come at the very time that you're seeing blue. There's also going to be a self-knowing of that consciousness that's seeing blue at the same time. Similarly, when one utters the word vase, I'll alternate between vase and vase. When one utters the word vase, it engenders awareness of both the sound of the word and the vase that is the referent of the word. Does that make sense? When one utters the word vase, it engenders awareness of both the sound of the word and the vase that is the referent of the word. So when you say to yourself, Trump, so there will be an awareness of the word Trump, and there will also be an awareness of some mental image that you associated with Trump, whether his physical body or his antics and so forth. That's what it's saying here. Similarly, when one utters the word vase, it engenders awareness of both the sound of the word and the vase that is the referent of the word. Consciousness, too, also consciousness, when it arises, this is Chittamatra argument, when consciousness arises, it is aware of both itself as well as its object. That's what they're using the example of the flame and the word as examples to say how they come simultaneously. Consciousness also, when it arises, is aware of both itself as well as its object. It does not become aware of the two in sequence. They're simultaneous, according to Chittamatra. Therefore, reflexive awareness is something that definitely exists. And then he has, so they claim, again, that's not in the Tibetan. He's making clear this is, yeah. So you don't get the impression that Lama Tsongkhapa is accepting this. This is the position of the Chittamatra, right? Jeremy, you following? Making sense?
Yes, but following somewhat. Thank you, Venerable George.
Okay, I noticed that Jay Garfield also asked a couple of times, maybe a few times during his class, did that make sense? And I saw his eyes must have been looking at the Zoom screen like me as they're going over the people, and everyone said they understood, but there were some points there were, I tell you, something went over my head when he was talking about one question someone asked, one gentleman, the first question that was asked about how it related to the path, let's say the Lan Rim, and Jay's explanation of that went over my head. So I think a lot of the stuff, especially the terminology, he doesn't mention the Tibetan words so much. He mentions the Sanskrit and the Western philosophical terms, So I think a lot of people were lost, and the few questions that were asked, some of them sounded like they really didn't understand. But at any rate, that's why I'm asking you guys if you are understanding. Sean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think their first example clearly doesn't work, but does the second one only fail because, I mean, it feels like when I say a word, the meaning of the word does come, but is the Prasangika saying that those are not happening simultaneously?
No, is not saying that they are not happening simultaneously. First of all, the first one, we wouldn't accept generally that a flame illuminates itself for other logical reasons. The second example of the word, I think the Prasangika would accept that upon uttering the word, because when you talk about speech, in order to say some word, you have to have a mental image associated with that word. So they would arise simultaneously, but that's not going to apply to self-awareness, even though the Chittamatra would like to force it, say, oh yeah, like that. These are only examples. It's not proving that that Rangrik, that self-knowing reflexivity, simultaneously knows the subject. It's just saying they're just sort of positing that. Okay, so they claim. Nadine, you're right.
So these two are kind of examples for what self-reflexive awareness is like. Examples.
Yeah, from the Chittamatra point of view.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So then it continues. Furthermore, they assert. So he's putting in all of these provisos here, so you don't think that this is a Prasangika or his own position. Furthermore, the Chittamatrans assert even those who do not yet accept reflexive awareness, Rangrik, they will have no choice but to admit its existence. For if one does not accept it, if one doesn't accept reflexive awareness or self-knowing at perception, there can be no subsequent recollection of an object in terms of I have seen this, or recollection of the subjective experience of seeing the object in terms of I have seen this. Okay, does that make sense? Who has read ahead? So some I always sort of advise you or suggest you, like a teacher saying to do your, the reading, but I don't think not everyone does. Sometimes you're coming in cold over these. But what does that mean? There can't be any subsequent recollection. Paul, what do you understand that to mean?
Well, I will be honest and say I have not read ahead. So,
Okay. I understand, yeah.
Let's say that it means you could not remember that you have seen something.
Yeah. So
That is, you would experience something at the time, but would not remember such.
Yeah. So Nadine, what do you think?
I just wanted to say I really have read ahead, but I didn't understand anything.
Right. Doris read ahead and she said she got a headache. So I'm not sure she was thinking maybe not to attend class so she'd get another headache. Louise, what do you think?
Just reminding you about taking a break.
Right. Thank you. So let's just play this out a little bit further here. So generally, if you talk about a memory of, when you talk about seeing blue, there are two things that you can remember. That you saw the blue, and you could also remember that, yeah, I remember seeing it, the act of seeing. So those are two separate memories. the memory of the blue object, and the memory that I was seeing blue, that subjective experience. Now let's take the subjective, remembering that I was seeing the blue. In order to have a memory of that, you have to have had an experience of seeing blue. That is to say, not just seeing blue, but you had to have it had to resonate within you that you were seeing blue at that time. And Chittamatra argues that that experience of seeing blue comes about because of Rangrik, because of that self-knower. That self-knower is not knowing the object, but is knowing the subjective consciousness. Following? Making sense? Richard, yeah, what do you think? Yeah. So, but yeah, go on.
It almost makes sense.
Almost makes sense. Okay, but the first part there in reading Venerable Jones, the memory of the object, there would not be the memory of the object later, saying earlier that object was seen. I'm not sure what Chittamatra's argument there is. Generally, we do admit, I think Chittamatra and Prasangika would admit that when your consciousness sees the object, let's say if you're talking about visual consciousness, it can be any of the consciousnesses, that is an experience that is experienced by that other looking consciousness. So I don't see why why they're claiming you have to have Rangrik for that, but I maybe there's some subtlety there. But this statement seems to be saying that in order to have the memory of the object and the memory of the experience of knowing the object, you have to have Rangrik. What I'm arguing is I think it's mainly Rangrik mainly is needed to verify that you had that you experienced the object, and that later you can think, yeah, I saw that. I remember seeing that. I remember when I was leaving Boston, it must have been, I don't know, graduated 67, I don't know, maybe 1971 or something like that. And I remember looking around where I was and thinking, well, how will I remember this? And I remember being very conscious of seeing this, this place. So we do have, sometimes we do have experiences like that when you vividly recall that you saw something. You actually experienced it. So that is what Chittamatra is mainly saying you need the self-knower for. Prasangika will have a separate explanation of that. And in the text by Paul Williams that Doris put the link to on the Internet Archive, he argues from the other point of view in that book, from the Sakya point of view, that you do need, sort of according with the Chittamatra, that you do need this reflexive awareness.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you can.
So that reflexive, I'm still confused as far as so you have the perception and in Chittamatra you have the perception and the cognition of that perception happening simultaneously in the first experience, and that creates, but then they're talking about remembering that cognition. But is the problem that they're trying to say that this Rangrik and that cognition are the same and not different objects?
They're the same nature. For instance, they're saying that the the consciousness, of course, for Chittamatra, the consciousness is arising from a seed on the alaya vijnana, right? But you can center on that consciousness. That consciousness seems to be seeing its object as different from itself, but it's seeing it. So that act of seeing, if we talk about eye consciousness, that's the function of consciousness as an other knower. An other knower. I don't want to say another. It is knowing something other than itself. It is knowing the blue, which seems to be different than the consciousness. But at the same time, that seed that arose as the consciousness, that consciousness not only is another knower, it also knows itself. It knows the experience. It's aware that you are knowing. So it's pointed inward. That was when we talked about the definition of Rangrik, okay? It is pointed.
But if you're talking about memory, though, the mind is looking at the object becomes the cognition, not the perception, correct?
What? So wait, don't get, there are two different things here. First of all, understand what Rangrik means. Of course, we're talking about memory now, but first of all, you have to understand what Rangrik means, what self-knowing or reflexive awareness means. It means the experience of the consciousness that is knowing something other. So it remembers that experience that is verified by Rangrik. The Rangrik knew that you were seeing. That can engender later a memory that I was seeing. Okay, you have to think about that a little bit. But is that more or less clear to others? What do you think, Don?
It's very hard, actually, to ascertain the difference in self-cognition and memory.
Yeah, so self-cognition is not memory. First of all, is self-cognition a conceptual mind, or a direct perception, Don?
Direct.
It's a direct perception. Is memory a direct perception or a conception?
More difficult, I think, conception.
Yeah, it has to be a conception. Yeah, it's something that you have a conceptual mind. You don't have memory with the eye consciousness. You have the mental factor. What is it? What is the Tibetan for memory, Paul? We say
isn't we say Drenma or
Renba. Yeah, that's not Smriti, is it?
it might be actually.
Yeah. So usually we translate, the mental fact of the five omnipresent mental factors. There's one that is translated as recollection.
Right.
Generally, it's not called memory because memory is a different kind of recollection. So that recollection is just what can keep the consciousness on the same object. Like when you're watching your breathing, you keep on the same object. You use or mindfulness, rather, recollection, mindfulness. We call it the mental factor mindfulness, right? So mindfulness you might confuse with memory because they have the same, they based on the same word.
I'm sorry, George. I'm sorry, Venerable George. Jesu Dremba, Anusmriti.
Anusmriti is what?
Jesu Dremba. That's usually what memory is.
Memory, right. So
it means after mindfulness.
Recall,
Jesu.
yeah, right. Recalling it afterwards. So let me just go a little bit further and we'll take a break. So first of all, they had said, therefore, reflexive awareness is something that definitely exists, so they claim. Furthermore, they assert that even those who do not yet accept reflexive awareness, he puts in the word yet. The Tibetan doesn't have that, but that's good. Yeah, so implying that they will come around to the right view, even though they don't accept reflexive awareness, the present time, they'll have no choice but to admit its existence. Because if one does not accept it, there can be no subsequent recollection, anusmrti, as Paul has pointed out, of an object in terms of, I have seen this, or the recollection of the subjective experience of seeing that object in terms of, I have seen this. The fact that you were knowing it, that you experienced that. Why is this so? It is impossible to have a recollection of something that has not been experienced. You can't remember it. You can't have a recollection of it if it hasn't been something that you've experienced. So if your eye consciousness sees the blue, that is an experience of that. That's why you can remember that you saw, what color was the what was it called? These guys in Minneapolis, the border patrol or whatever they are. ICE, yeah, the ICE car in the New York Times 3D rendition of it. What color was the car? Oh, it was blue. You remember blue. You remember seeing blue. You watched the New York Times 3D reconstruction of the shooting of this dear woman. So you remember the blue. You experienced that. You saw that, and you can remember the blue because of that experience. And according to Chittamatra, because you have an experience of the consciousness seeing the blue car, therefore you can remember, I saw that blue. Let's see. Remembering is thus a subjective experience that has as its object something that was previously experienced. According to you who deny reflexive awareness, you naughty prasangikas and others, not only prasanghika, Vaibhashika don't accept reflexive awareness, nor do the Sautransika Svatantrikas like Bhava Viveka, nor even the Yogacara Svatantrikas like Gyanagarbha. They all say it doesn't exist. So, according to you who deny reflexive awareness, they say, since the previous cognition, such as the perception of a blue object, was never experienced in its own time, there can be no subsequent recollection of it. Okay, let's take a little break. To other people. There we go. Yeah. Paul, you got a coffee. I thought you were getting chocolate-covered coffee bean. Yeah.
Tea, Venerable.
Tea, okay. Yeah, not coffee, okay. Gone are the days when we would be able to drink lots of coffee. Okay, so yeah, is it making sense so far? Richard, what are you thinking? Kind of, yeah, kind of. Okay, you have to go back and look at it. So in terms of this last stanza this last paragraph that we read, let me read a little of what Geshe Sopa said on July 23rd, 2003. That's my birthday is July 23rd. So someone mentioned, oh, that auspicious date. I remember that. In 2003, he said, so this is not going to be anything different, but a little bit, saying it in different words sometimes. When you remember something, you have to have experienced it before. You have to have an experience of it. So the Tibetan word is nyongwa for experience, or nyamsu nyongwa. So Geshe quoted the lines ngar, that means previously, nyamsu nyongwa. You have to have previously experienced it. If you have not experienced it previously, ngar nyamsu mang nyongwa. If you haven't experienced it, you won't be able to remember it. Okay, you have to have some kind of experience of it. Otherwise, you will not remember. Experience has to to precede remembering. So when we talked about recollection in our meditation, we say, in order to have recollection, you have to have had experience of the breathing previously, then you can hold it in mind, remember? So it's a similar kind of thing there. So at the time of remembering, there are two memories. One of the subject mind, one of the object, and one of the subject. You have to experience both of them before the memory. Experience the object and experience the subject. I guess what maybe that was maybe implicit in that where Lama Tsongkhapa had mentioned before, in order to have a memory, you had to remember both the subject and the object. And I was saying, seemed like you only had to remember the subject if you wanted to remember the experience. But he's saying to have this memory, you have to have them both because they're linked according to Chittamatra. If you don't believe in self-awareness and in reflexive awareness, these two kinds of memory cannot exist. So Chittamatra is saying that. If you say, why not? Why can't they exist? Chichir Shena in Tibetan. A memory cannot rise if something was not earlier experienced. Memory is never by itself. You can't just have a memory popping up of something that you never experienced, right? You can have an imagination of something popping up, but that's not an actual memory, right? Do you see the difference? Memory is never by itself, but is experiencing again. In other words, is re-experiencing what some other consciousness earlier experienced. Memory uses the earlier experience as its object. So if memory is the subject of the earlier experience, it has the earlier experience as its object. Okay, so that was Geshe-la's some commentary on that paragraph. Okay, let's go continue. So Thupten translation continues. This argument seeks to prove the existence of a prior experience of perceiving a blue object by using its subsequent recollection as the logical reason, right? The existence of a prior experience of perceiving a blue object. So that could include both the remembering the object and remembering the subject. Otherwise, if the argument were formulated as follows, there exists for the previous perception of a blue object a reflexive awareness that experienced it. If the Chittamatra were to try to use that as their proof, it wouldn't be perfect, it wouldn't be right. It's not a suitable example. It's not right because no suitable example could be found that can be established for the other party in debate. That means if they're using as a reason the existence of self-awareness, if they're using that as an example, the Prasangika doesn't accept the existence of self-awareness. It's a subtle point. It may not be that important. So otherwise, if the argument were formulated as follows, there exists for the previous perception of a blue object a reflexive awareness that experienced it. No suitable example could be found that would be established for the other party in the debate. The other party meaning those people that don't accept self-awareness. They say, what you've just said is not true because, we don't, if we're debating with you, we have to accept the subject, the predicate, the reason, and the example. And we don't accept your example that Rangrik, the existence of Rangrik. So continuing, so they don't formulate the proof statement that way. Once it's established that there is a subjective experience, once it's established, once you can prove that there is a subjective experience of perceiving a blue object, that means once you can establish that in your own experience, because you can remember seeing something, you can remember that experience of seeing, then such an experience can be determined, that experience to be either a self-cognition or a cognition by other. So here, yeah. So that experience of knowing that you saw, okay, how is that known? It could either be known by the self-knower that's experiencing it at that time, the experience, or it would be known by another consciousness other than the consciousness perceiving blue. You know, that it was seeing that. What we saw previously, Chittamatra position was that one consciousness cannot perceive another. That's one thing we've already talked about. But here the argument goes, the first alternative is not acceptable to you Prasangikas and so forth, who reject self-cognition, while the second, the positing a separate consciousness perceiving the first consciousness perceiving blue, is something that our standpoint, our Chittamatra standpoint, has ruled out. Generally, we say you can't have a separate consciousness knowing another consciousness. Remember, we mentioned that that can cause problems for them. How do you explain knowing another person's consciousness? But at any rate, it's not like a separate consciousness would perceive that. If it did perceive that, there would be other faults, Chittamatra says. If you needed another consciousness to verify that the consciousness perceiving blue was experiencing blue, to verify that, you'd have to have another consciousness you have to have another consciousness to verify that, and you have to have another consciousness to verify that. That's coming up. In this way, the generality, quote, being experienced comes, unquote, comes to be untenable for you that don't accept reflexive awareness, which means for you, even experience itself would become impossible. This is how Chittamatra argues against their opponents, or their opponents in the sense that all these different schools of Vaibhashika and so forth, and Prasangika. In fact, this is their best argument to prove reflexive awareness. As Geshe Zopa commented on this, this is their, what was the Tibetan? Rangrik Drupe, Rangrikpa Draksho Yino. Can you follow that, Paul? Rangrik Drupe Rikpa, reasoning which establishes Rangrik. Draksho Yino. Drak usually means wrathful, right, or fierce. Sho is a superlative particle, means most fierce, fiercest, or most wrathful argument. So Geshe Zopa had said, what did he say here? I have a long section here by Geshe. I'm not going to read it all. But he said, usually when we say, well, anyway, when he's saying this is the fiercest argument, that means sort of like the best, the strongest, like who can, like the person who's arguing with you with a loud voice, right? They're right in your face. Okay, let me continue on. So I'll read some of Geshe-la's commentary on this on Monday in our discussion group. I won't muddy the waters here. Actually, we'll clear the waters, but takes a lot of exposition. So to continue, Jimpa says, it doesn't say that in Tibetan, he's just trying to connect it to the previous statement. Now, it is incorrect to assert that the previous perception of a blue object, so we're talking about the perception, the knowing of the blue object, is experienced by some separate cognition. If such were the case, two problematic consequences would follow. There are two, when we say would follow, there are two consequences, absurd consequences for the Chittamatra. If the cognition explicitly perceiving a blue object is established by another subsequent cognition, the question arises, does that cognition require another separate cognition as its cognizer? This is what Richard was nodding to before when this would need another. So let's unpack that. If the cognition explicitly perceiving blue, that phrase, let me just see how FPMT, how Venerable Joan translated that. She said, it is also not suitable, she doesn't have this word to continue, it is also not suitable for an apprehender of blue to be experienced by a consciousness that is other than itself. If that were suitable, if you could do that, if there was another consciousness that perceive it, there would be two invalidations of it. The first being that it would follow that there would be an endless regression that we're just talking about, because if a consciousness that perceives blue is perceived by another subsequent consciousness, does that subsequent consciousness need another separate consciousness that comprehends it? Or does it not need another separate consciousness that comprehends it? Okay, so Thupten Jinpa has, I think he's, when he says here, if such were the case, two problematic consequences would follow. First, there would be the problem of infinite regress, because if the cognition explicitly perceiving a blue object is established by another subsequent cognition, so the cognition explicitly perceiving a blue object, what is that in the Tibetan? What is that? When he's saying explicitly. Do you see that, Paul, in the Tibetan? Do you have the Tibetan there? I'm not sure where he gets that. Maybe that's there. Okay, anyway, I'll leave that for
I'm looking for it, George.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So at any rate, if the cognition that is perceiving blue apprehending consciousness, perceiving a blue object, if that has to be established by another subsequent cognition, the question arises, does that cognition require another separate cognition that gets the infinite regress? And if it, or does it not? So, the second consequence is that the cognition will not be positively determined, will not positively determine other objects. So this is a very, very subtle point that we'll talk a bit on Monday more about. Thupten Jinpa's note there, number 609, he's talking about the word Yongsu Choba or Paricheda. In fact, I think maybe J. Garfield mentioned Paricheda in the discourse. I can't remember. Anyway, Cheta usually means to cut. So Paricheda Yongsu Choba. Usually you don't find Yongsu Choba in the dictionary, Tibetan dictionary. You find Yongchu, which is abbreviation of that. So that note, let me read it in context here, talking about the second consequence. So Jimba's note 609 says, Yongsu Chopa or Pari Cheda, this is from the end of your book there, note 609, drawing from classical Buddhist epistemological thought, that means the Pramana literature, Tsongkhapa uses two key terms, positive determination, or Yongsu Choba. If you look in Jeffrey Hopkins' dictionaries of Tibetan Buddhist terms, he says, Hopkins translates Yongchu, that's the Yongsu Chopa. He doesn't have Yongsu Chopa as an entry, he just has Yongchu. That means positive inclusion. It means also exclusionary elimination. At any rate, Jimba's note says, Tsongkhapa uses two key terms, positive determination, Yongsu Choba, versus negative determination, Nampar Choba. That means to completely cut off or to preclude something. He uses those to characterize the epistemic function of knowledge engendering cognition. Oh, that rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Some of you might say, of course it does. He uses that to characterize the epistemic function of a knowledge engendering cognition. What does that mean? It's not, if you break it up, it doesn't sound so bad. What does that mean, Subhash? You don't know? Okay. Paul, do you have a take on that?
I was wondering if maybe that's how he's framing clear and knowing, but I don't know. Selshing Rigpa, is he rephrasing Selshing Rigpa as Yongche and Nongche?
Well, he's saying that Lama Tsongkhapa is using this term, Yongsu Truba, from the Pramana literature to characterize epistemic function, to characterize the epistemic function of a knowledge engendering cognition. That's the term, that's the phrase I'm talking about. So that's not a translation of something. That's just Thupten Jinpa's talking about that. So knowledge engendering cognition, that means a cognition that brings about knowledge. That would mean if a cognition brings about knowledge, knowing, in other words, it is what we usually call a consciousness. It knows something. The epistemic function, what does that mean, Paul?
I assume that just means pramana.
Yeah, so epistemic
so like it acquires knowledge.
Epistemology is study of how we know, right? So that's one part, like when we talked about low rig course, when we talked about awareness and knowing. So one part was how we know, like the 7 ways of knowing and so forth. That's the epistemological part of low rig study. And then there's the study of the mental factors, which is different than the epistemology. The epistemology is how we know, which talks about, correct awareness, doubt, perverted awareness, and so forth, inattentive perception, and so forth. So that's what he's talking about, epistemic function. For example, when we perceive, say, for instance, a blue flower, the explicit content of that knowledge, that knowing, the explicit content of that, explicit object of that, is the cognition of the thing as blue and as flower. I don't agree with that. If we perceive, say, a blue flower, if you're talking about the eye perception, does your eye perception see flower?
No,
Good. Why not?
just sees shape and color.
It sees blue, and it sees shape. So if you attribute the shape as the shape of the flower, that maybe you can argue that way. Did you just get a flower there in front of you, Paul? Yeah, a blue flower. Thanks, Jennifer. I assume that's Jennifer bringing in the blue flower. Okay. So, however, for example, when we perceive, say, a blue flower, the explicit content of that knowledge is the cognition of the thing as blue and flower. Generally, we'd say the explicit object of that is blue, or the shape of the flower, which maybe you can identify as from the lower's tendency point of view, everything, even the shape, what is a flower? It's the shape of the flower, according to some of the lower tenets. Maybe that's what he's meaning. However, an implicit knowledge arises simultaneously of the negative function of that cognition. That is, in other words, the elimination of the thing as being non-blue and non-flower. Right? So you have, when you realize blue, you're explicitly realizing, directly realizing blue, and indirectly or implicitly realizing the absence of non-blue. Don looks disappointed. That would seem obvious, right, Don? Realize it's not blue. When you realize explicitly that it's blue, you're implicitly realizing that there is no non-blue there. That is not non-blue. It is not yellow, it's not red, so forth. Okay. So just some comment of Geshe Sopa here. The second rejection is as follows. If, for example, eye consciousness which sees blue experiences the blue apprehender itself, if it has to hold or grasp the eye consciousness itself, then it will not be able to see another blue. This is because itself is utilized trying to hold or grasping that earlier subject. Okay, so this is the part that we didn't go through here so much. The second consequence, reading Thupten Jinpa's translation, the second consequence is that the cognition will not positively determine other objects. So, in explaining that, if the preceding cognition were perceived by a subsequent cognition, that subsequent cognition, the latter would not perceive other objects such as form, sound, and so on, because the subsequent cognition would not direct its focus to other objects. So what is he talking about? It's all there, but it's the first time you read it, Ron's not agreeing. It's all there. So he's saying, so the second, the consequence was that if you need to have another knower knowing the first knower, so that other knower, let's say, for instance, when I see my glasses, let's say the glasses of time 1 or 12 o'clock glasses, the consciousness that arises of that, is that simultaneous with the glasses at time 1, Rachel? can usually depend on you to figure these out.
I'm sorry. I was
You're distracted. Sorry,
I was contemplating something and I couldn't focus on what you were saying.
I wasn't focusing that you were focusing elsewhere. So say for instance, if you have my mug of 12 o'clock, the consciousness that sees that mug, that knows that mug, is that the consciousness at 12 o'clock or at 12:01 or something?
So
Simultaneous with the object?
So are you asking if the object appears simultaneously with the consciousness, therefore it's at the same time?
Yeah, basically.
So whatever, however you said it, I can't answer. But if you're saying here's the cup and the consciousness, they have to appear at the same time. So that would be at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, you think so? Is that right, Paul?
Sorry, my computer is very slow. I'm sorry, George. Can you restate that?
So here's my point. I'll state the solution. So consciousness arises from its referent object, right? It's the object it refers to. They are in a cause and effect relationship. The consciousness is the effect of perceiving that aspect. So what you are perceiving at any one moment is always something that existed a previous moment ago. That's what this is talking about here. If the preceding cognition were to be perceived by the subsequent cognition, the latter would not perceive other objects such as form and so on, for the subsequent cognition would not direct its focus to other objects. That means if this consciousness then that is knowing blue has to be known by another consciousness, that can only be another mental consciousness, right? You can't know consciousness with your eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body consciousness. So another mental consciousness in your own continuum would have to be knowing that. So if that would mean the mental consciousness then would be focused on that inner experience that you just had, and it wouldn't be able to have a continuity of remembering the blue. If the preceding cognition were to be perceived by a subsequent cognition, the latter, the subsequent cognition, would then not perceive other objects such as form, sound, and so forth, or blue, for the subsequent cognition would not direct its focus to other objects. It would be focused on the experience that you just had of seeing blue. Whoa. What do you think, Nadine? Getting a headache?
I think that's probably not Prasangika.
Oh no, this is well, yeah, you're right. Yeah, this Chittamatra is saying like that.
It's very difficult, really.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
So they're saying they're trying to prove Rangrik, right? So they're saying that Rangrik is necessary to prove that you've experienced the seeing of an object, for instance. Because the alternative would be that you'd have to have something else rather than Rangrik. You would have to have an other knower, another moment of mental consciousness that perceives the experience. And if that were the case, that mental consciousness then would be busy multitasking on watching that experience and not have a continuity of seeing blue or other objects.
But is the blue not in that the first cognition that you're now remembering?
No, the blue is not in that. The experience of.
But I thought it said specifically, you're looking at, I have seen this. That's the blue. I have seen blue. So I'm looking at, I have seen blue. Now I'm saying now I am or I have seen this, which this is that I have seen blue. So the blue's there still.
Yeah, so that's just remembering the apprehension that you saw, and what you saw was blue. So those are related. Yeah, so it's complicated. This is their argument. So let's just finish this up, so we can sort of like at the end of the year, you take examination of your course. It's kind of like the fire puja at the end of a retreat. So you can forget about it afterwards, all the mistakes you made or anything. You did the test. Okay, I graduated Geometry 101. I don't have to worry about it any longer. Okay, so let's just finish this up here. This is because so this continues. This is because the entire continuum of cognition, all the moments within a stream, will have their preceding moments as their objects. That would be a consequence of this. For if the preceding cognitions are perceived by subsequent cognitions, it is on the basis of taking the preceding cognition as its appearing object that subsequent cognition has to arise. In that case, it will not let go of the inner objective condition, which is more proximal, which is closer. It won't give that up to take on an external object, which is more distant. That's their argument. Makes sense from their point of view, but I'm not sure. It's kind of like Jay Garfield's first lecture. He wasn't sure whether people were understanding what was being said. But we'll talk more on Monday. Doris, what do you think?
Just to go back a little,
Yeah.
you missed the sentence.
Oh, sorry.
There is no problem of the logical entailment not holding here. And I have that highlighted as I don't understand what that means.
Okay, where was that?
Right in the middle.
In the middle of that paragraph.
Of the paragraph we just read, or the?
It's right after this is because the entire continuum of cognition.
Hold a moment. Okay. The latter would not perceive other objects such as form, sound, and so forth, for the subsequent cognition would not direct its focus to other objects. Is that what you mentioned?
The next sentence I don't understand.
This is because the entire continuum.
Sorry.
Well, just read the next two.
It's after the next. This. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, I'll read it. So this is because the entire continuum of cognition, all the moments within a stream, will have their preceding moments as their objects. There is no problem of the logical entailment not holding here.
Yeah, that's the one.
So this is what always gets us. Too bad Richard is not Richard. Stephen is not here, because like you and I, Stephen always was befuddled by these double and triple negatives. So it says there is no problem of the logical entanglement not holding. So that means the logical entailment will hold. There will be that, there's a pervasion that the consciousness will always be stuck on looking at the previous moment of consciousness and never be able to see other objects or take up other objects like blue and so forth. For if the preceding cognitions are perceived by the subsequent cognitions, it is on the basis of taking the preceding cognition as its appearing object that the subsequent cognition has to arise. In that case, it will not let go of the inner objective condition, which is more proximal, to take on an external object, which is more distant. So if the mental consciousness verified that you were seeing by remembering the previous moment of consciousness, because that's so close and intimate within the consciousness, the mental consciousness is not going to give that up to then go out to something outside there, distant. Okay. Continuing. Now you might offer the following rejoinder. The subsequent blue perceiving cognition, that cognizes the preceding blue perceiving cognition arises simultaneous with another instance of cognition perceiving a blue object. So there is thus no problem of cognition not moving to other external objects. This is Chittamatra saying, you might try to say this. If you assert this, you will incur the consequence of two separate continua of I consciousness, belonging to the same class of consciousness, arising simultaneously in one and the same person. So here, again, gets into the deep grass, right? This is extra dry bones. So this is a famous assumption in Buddhism. This is the quotation that Thupten Jinpa that I mentioned said he couldn't find the source for. If you admit this, you would have to be contradicting the scriptural statement that everyone quotes all the time, but no one gives the source for it. Sentient beings possess a singular or separate individual continua for each class of consciousness. So this is the Tibetan, what is it? Namshet. I didn't put it out here so easily. See, so this quotation. Where is it, Paul? I'm not seeing it in the event. Here we go. De dona semchen nam nampa shepe gyu chikpa te. So that means, in other words, re reao. So that means semchen nam, sentient beings, plural. Nampa shepe gyu, the continuum of their consciousnesses. Means Nampa shepa usually is referring to the primary consciousness. Chikpate, it is one. They have one continuum of any one consciousness. They have one continuum of I consciousness. It's not like your I consciousness can see blue and at the same time see yellow. It's just seeing one thing at one time.
But I thought some of the Buddhas and things could do that.
Yeah. So this is where we're talking about deep grass here. So this is we'll go more into this next Monday, but so this is what's being talked about here. Let me see what we say. If you assert this, if you say there's no problem and the consciousness could know another consciousness in its own continuum, you will incur the consequence of two separate continua of I consciousness belonging to the same class of consciousness, arising simultaneously in one and the same person. So generally, one person has just one continuum of I consciousness, right? It's not like I would say Geshe Tekchok. Those are how many people met Geshe Tekchok? I think Rachel, did you ever study with Geshe Tekchok? Don, you've seen Geshe Tekchok, right? So he had the one eye was a little bit askew, right? I don't know if you noticed that. I remember that was when we studied with him so many classes in his room. We were sitting up looking at him. We weren't sure if he was looking at us or someone else, kind of like Kash Patel, a little bit like that. So it's not as though, one eye consciousness could be seeing Dieter over there, and one consciousness could be looking at you. You only have one continuum of I consciousness, of any consciousness. So if you admit this, you would be, what was that? If you assert this, you would incur the consequence of two separate continua of I consciousness belonging to the same class of consciousness, arising simultaneously in one and the same person, like seeing Dieter and seeing me. If you admit this, if you say you can, you would be contradicting the scriptural statement Sentient beings possess singular or separate individual continua for each, and he has in parentheses there, or in brackets, each class of consciousness. So this, it refers to his note 610, where he says, this is a well-known sutra quote cited in numerous texts. Everyone quotes this, when they're talking about different problems like this, as though this is, the Buddha said, but they never give the where he said this. So he says, this is a well-known sutra quote cited in numerous texts, especially those of Buddhist epistemologists like Dignaga and Dharmakirti. However, nowhere have I seen this quote actually sourced. Nowhere have I seen. I haven't seen this sourced anywhere. That it was quoting this sutra or that sutra or continuum. So it's one of those enigmatic quotations that has come down through the oral lineages and so forth, although it's written, obviously, without quoting where the Buddha actually said this. Okay, so I'm just going to read the next, the quotation from the commentary. So that means Chandrakirti's commentary. I think this is from Chandrakirti's commentary, right? Oh, no, yeah, Delbade. So that means, as Joan points out, that means the auto commentary. That means the Chandrakirti's own Madhyamakavatara Bhasham, the auto commentary to the Karikas. In that, Chandrakirti said, just as 100 petals of a blue lotus are pierced by a single shot of an arrow, consciousnesses arise serially, one after the other, even though it seems as if they engage simultaneously. What does that mean? The famous picture, let's say, of a bullet flying through a telephone book. So the bullet does it, it goes so fast through there, it looks like it went through the whole telephone book just like that. But actually, it went through page 1 first, then page 2, it pierced page 3, then page 4. It's only because of the rapidity of it that seems to be simultaneous. So it says, just as 100 petals of a blue lotus, if you were to pile up the petals in a big pile, that would be nice, huh? Big pile of blue lotus petals, hundreds of them. That can be pierced by the shot of an arrow. It doesn't say arrow there. That means, like Geshe Sopa gave the example, like, say if you have a knife or an awl. Is that how you say it? AWL? Awl or awl? Awl? The tool looks like just a sharp thing. Or the thing you use to chop ice with, ice pick. If you push it through there, just as 100 petals of lotus are pierced by an ice pick, but it's going sequentially through those lotuses. Consciousnesses arise serially, one after the other, even though it seems as if they engage simultaneously. So that's where we're going to start next time. What do you think? Yeah. How are we doing from today? Jeremy, what do you think?
Just a quick question, George. That scriptural statement, sentient beings possess singular or separate individual continua for each class of consciousness. Is that controversial, or is that accepted by old Buddhist schools, do you think?
So this is going into deep grass. Generally, everyone accepts that the Buddha said that, but how they interpret it might be a little bit different. So, for instance, we talked about this in other contexts during this Gompa Rapsel class, although you may not remember it immediately. Say, for instance, when we talk about attachment, the klesha attachment, Where does klesha, in which consciousness is klesha take place, Nadine? Can you have klesha in your eye consciousness?
No, only the mental main consciousness.
You can't have attachment in your eye consciousness,
No.
even though it seems that way sometimes. Your eye is attached to something. It's your mental consciousness. So when you have when you have a mental consciousness that is, let's say, attached to something, that is engaging in the mental factor, in its retinue, there is the mental factor attachment, which happens to be a klesha. It happens to be a delusion, right? It creates negative karma. It keeps us from knowing things correctly. It pollutes the mind. At that point, the basis of that attachment is adhering to a truly existent, inherently existent, attractive object. That's how the attachment rises, right? You have to have. So in some commentaries, it says there can be two mental consciousnesses simultaneously. So this is an answer to the question about, I think Jeremy was asking about whether this was controversial at all. So it said that there can be a mental consciousness that's perceiving incorrectly or grasping incorrectly that the object is inherently existing, that is simultaneous with the attachment that wants to get it. Anyway, that's something we talked about before, and we will talk about again a little bit on Monday. So these are some tricky questions, and as I mentioned before, so you don't have to worry about feeling stupid or something. Geshe-la said, Geshe Sopa said, this is a little bit difficult section. So when he said a little bit difficult, yeah, there might be some more difficult, but this is, and we'll talk about that more on Monday. So before we finish up, anyone have any other questions, Doris? Yeah.
Going back to that sentence that I have issue with or problem with.
Yeah.
Not that I can't work out the double negative. I got that part. I just don't understand why is it saying that there?
Yeah, so there is no problem of the logical entanglement not holding here, because if the preceding cognitions are perceived by the subsequent cognitions, there's giving the reason why it's saying that. It's saying that first of all, there's no problem of the pervasion not being there. So the pervasion is that here, according to Chittamatra, the pervasion is that the subsequent cognition would not give up looking at the inner cognition and wouldn't give that up to look at the blue. So you saw something once, and then the mental consciousness that was experiencing that wouldn't give it up, wouldn't give up the perception of that inner consciousness afterwards. You would never perceive anything other than the experience of that consciousness afterwards. So there's a pervasion of this. This is because the entire continuum of cognition, all the moments within a stream, will have their preceding moments as their objects. There is no problem of the logical entailment not holding here. In other words, there is a pervasion. For if the preceding cognitions are perceived by the subsequent cognitions, it is on the basis of taking the preceding cognition as the appearing object. Anyway, you can read that. Yeah, anyway, think about that and raise that again on Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah. Paul, do you have any questions? What are you thinking?
Just my computer.
Oh yeah, I know we can hear you.
Yeah, just trying to keep this in the context of Dharmakirti. So just trying to keep that in mind,
right,
in terms of that presentation.
So on Monday, I'll present what Geshe Zopa brought up in these previous two paragraphs in this context of quotations from Pramanavartaka, from the third chapter in the Tibetan reading, which is on direct perception. I think in the Sanskrit direct perception is the second chapter. Paul, we've gone over this before several times. Anyway, in the Pramanavartaka. So but using the Tibetan editions, they said the third chapter on direct perception. Like, for instance, the second chapter of Pramanavartaka is proving that the Buddha is a valid person, right? The first chapter is laying out the logic that's necessary to have a correct logical reasoning. The third chapter is in the Tibetan version is on direct perception. So in that context, there are some quotations from the Pramanavartaka in this section that the students would debate upon in trying to understand this deep grass, or as, what did Jay Garfield call it? Someone, I think, Suvansh, what did you call it? The deep
dismal slope.
Dismal slope?
SLOUGH, or swamp.
Oh, swamp. SWAN.
Yeah, that's another word he uses.
Swamp. Okay, the dismal swamp. Yeah, so this is the deep, or as I say, the deep grass or the dry bones. Sean, final comment before we dedicate?
I'll just save it for Monday.
Yeah, okay. Don't explode.
Let me think about it a little more and make sure I'm wording it correct.
Okay, so let's dedicate the virtues that we've created today, especially in the United States right now, when there is so much distrust between the government and the people, turning into violent actions like the murder of this lady. Her last name was Good. What was her first name? Wasn't Louise, was it? Anyway, she was shot in the head by this policeman. Anyway, so due to these virtues that I've created today, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very same state of being a Guru Buddha. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen in my mind stream and the mind stream of others arise and grow. And may that which has arisen as a result of these virtues, may that any bodhicitta I have or others have, may it not diminish, but increase more and more. And then prayer for the quick seeing of perceiving the precious face of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's reincarnation. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, the Buddhas, you Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang Drakpa, means Lama Tsongkhapa, father and son, you are the spiritual father of Gyaltsab and Khedrub, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, I make requests. You are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings. You suddenly departed to peace, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem, incredible blessings, and the great waves of the truth, the power of the truth, of the great waves of bodhicitta, mind generation, of the children of the victorious ones, that's an epithet of the Bodhisattvas. So by the truth that there are great waves of bodhicitta, of the of the Bodhisattvas. May the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. Finally, for all of our teachers, Dalai Lamas, our primordial gurus, our gurus of the past, the present, and the future, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means motivated out of mercy, not pity, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. The implication is, I request you to live long and stable lives. When I said moved by mercy, not pity, that was in reference to what Jay had mentioned in his lecture, also in response to someone's question about pity. There's a difference between pity, where you're sort of egotistically involved in something, you feel better than others and you pity them, you're looking down upon them. Okay, so look forward to seeing whole bunches of you on Monday. And certainly next Saturday. Read through this again. Think about it. Bring up your questions. And try to practice the mind training between now and Monday and between now and next Saturday. There's so many things happening in our lives, especially here in the United States, but in other countries also. I think in Germany, they had power outages and supposedly fixed by now, but maybe precipitated by the Russians, some people said. Okay, so look forward to seeing you. Take care.
Thank you, Ren.
Venerable George.
Venerable.
Thank you, Venerable.
Take care.